it's the proudest day, the proudest time in the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. You know, I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all we said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.
Welcome along to Krunching Gears, the Rally Podcast. I'm delighted now to welcome along Conor Edwards and Graham Nesbitt. Lads, you are very welcome along.
Thanks very much, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Graham's here to help us launch the in-car from Donegal 2006, the Mitsubishi year. Graham, what a year, what a find.
Absolutely, Kevin, and thanks very much to yourself and Conor for having me along. It was one of those things, a bit random. We knew this footage was lying around the house somewhere, and at Christmas time we managed to dig it out. And when we sat down and watched it together, we thought, this is something that I think a wider audience might enjoy. And myself and Kevin got chatting and said, would it be even more crack? We'll get the footage put live on YouTube, but even better, we'll get Andrew and James on to just have a chat about it and sort of reminisce and look back on what was, for me, one of the most exciting years of the Donegal Rally. And obviously for us as a team and for Andrew and James, probably one of the greatest wins, the last win they had as a pair. And I think as everyone's going to get to see shortly after this, we got the two boys on. They're in great form, great bit of crack. And, as you mentioned, Kevin, we're going to put the footage live this evening on YouTube. There's 12 or 13 stages from that rally that people can go and watch at their leisure on YouTube. And, you'll certainly see some hairy moments and some really good action. And really, for us, it was great to get it out there.
That's for sure. And Conor, we've had the privilege of previewing some of this in-car. It is something else, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's just phenomenal to watch. Like, genuinely, a master at work over the Donegal stages. And again, stages everybody's fairly familiar with. And, not only do we get to see the clips of the in-car shortly, but we have that fantastic commentary from Andrew and James, reliving the stories as it happened.
Yeah, what a night we had. Our nerd antennae was on full alert, So, Graham, before we go any further, we have to take time now to thank you for helping us pull this project together. Andrew and James as well for making the magic happen. But I think without further ado, I think we started off with the conversation, and it was Graham, you took the reins and telling us how you come across the footage.
That's it, Kevin. So thankfully we've managed to pull this out, and look, hopefully everyone enjoys the conversation. I know we had a great bit of crack chatting about it, and I think it gave the two boys a lot of food for thought to maybe have another chat again in the future when we get a few more of these tapes pulled out. But hopefully everyone enjoys the footage, and let's crack on to the conversation.
Absolutely, Kevin. Well, I think it's probably important to say there had been a few beers consumed a couple of days after Christmas, and myself and Andrew were sitting in the front room looking to put on something to watch. And I said, I'll go and have a wee route around here and see is there anything interesting. And lo and behold, came across Andrew Nesbitt and James O'Brien, Donegal 06 in-car camera. I think it was about 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night when we put it on, and 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, we were still sitting there watching Atlantic Drive. So it was slightly unexpected, but having watched through it, we said, this has been lost to the cupboard for 17 years, and really we need to get this out there, because I think obviously for us and for a lot of people, it was a very special rally, and some of the footage is just absolutely incredible. And to see some of the commitment that the two lads on the call showed, it really just felt like something that I think other rally fans in Ireland and further afield would want to see.
That is for sure. I've had the privilege of looking at some of the stages, and I don't know. I don't think any of the two years was right wired at the time at all, But Andrew, from your point of view, 2006, you'd sort of said in 2005, that was it. You were hanging up the helmet. You were going to walk away. You had nothing left to prove. What was the motivation, about coming back in 2006?
Well, I think we have to tell the story what happened here, because it really was a very unusual experience as to how the whole deal came around. I got a phone call one day from a guy in Oma, and he said, Andrew, I'll not mention names here, but we'll call him Walter Mitty in the meantime. I want to put a rally team together. I want the British rally champion and I want the Irish rally champion. And I want you to both, I'm going to put a package together. I'm going to bring you to the Donegal International Rally this year in 2006. And I'd like to meet you. So we arrived in Armagh, we met, we talked. And my goodness, the story was so way out there that I was going to get a chance with James O'Brien to drive a world rally car, the real deal, as James calls it. And they were going to be bringing Mark Higgins along as well with Rory Kennedy. And I'm going, well, this has to happen if it's ever going to happen. So I'm going, is this for real? And then I had to, gather myself up 2 months before the rally and go start training again. Now, at this stage, I'm 46 years of age, and I'm thinking, well, am I really fit to take on the British champion in Mark Higgins, who is a very unique driver in himself, technically very capable, the present James Bond 007 driver. Like, this guy has some history behind him. And so at that time, I'm going, okay, I'll follow this through and we'll see how we get on. So this guy pulled the deal together with John Easton in Mitsubishi World Rally Team. And about 10 days before the rally, John Easton phoned me. He says, John Easton here, Andrew, I haven't heard from you. Well, I says, we've some guy pulling the whole deal together. He says, well, I haven't heard from him either. And we have the cars prepped and ready to go to Donegal. And I'm just asking, is it happening? Because we need to get over there 2 or 3 days before the event, get the car set up and everything. And I'm going, okay, right, well, I'm happy to put my deposit down. He says, no, 1 car, no show. 2 cars, there is a show. He says, the Irish champion, the British champion, that's the deal. If that deal is going to go through, we're coming. If it doesn't go through, both cars, nothing's going to arrive in Ireland. And I hesitated for 3 seconds. And I said, okay, I'll pay the deposit for both cars. How about that? He goes, okay, then the deal's on. In the meantime, we couldn't find Walter Mitty. He disappeared off the face of the earth. In fact, I did see him at the side of my eye at the finish ramp running in the direction of Oma.
Hopefully he's still running.
Oh, in a funny way, James and I would always say we have to thank someone out there by the name of Walter Mitty who pulled the deal together, because we would never have had the opportunity, one, to drive a Mitsubishi World Rally car, and secondly, win the Donegal International Rally for the 6th time. It was an amazing situation for us. But, James will tell you the pace of that car was amazing. But we got the 2 cars to Ireland, but the first car arrived, which was my car. Mm-hmm. But Mark was allowed to test that car between 9 and 12 o'clock on the day. And then I was to get into the car and test between 1 and 4. At 3 o'clock, Mark was still in the car testing my car. And I'm going, Mark, you're going to have to give me a chance to drive this car, because your car is only 2 hours away. He says, no, I'm continuing testing. He was a test driver for Mitsubishi, don't forget. Mm-hmm. He was at that level. And I'm going, but Mark, I have to know what the suspension setup is. Anyway, long story short, John Easton asked him to let me into the car, and I could start to drive the car. Sorry, James never was in the car actually at all. So the test engineer got in, and we warmed the car up for probably 5-6 minutes, and we did a couple of runs up and down the road. And I said, right, I'm going to attack this section of road at about 80%. Well, lo and behold, the car stood on its nose like a bucking bronco, and it came back down again, and it jumped again, and it landed, and we went up the road another 50 meters, 100 meters, and stopped. I said, are those his final settings? As in Mark Higgins. He says, yes, those are his final settings. Right. Now, I'm going to get this bucking bronco to control itself, but you have to promise me no one gets my settings for at least 1 day. and we tested for another 2 hours, and all of a sudden we were fit to take this kick and jump and dip flat, and they became our settings for the rally. So there was 2 settings. There was 2 identical cars, Mitsubishi World Rally cars, the exact same engine power, torque, everything was identical, but the 2 suspension settings were different. And I'm nearly going to say completely different. They were. So I had said to James when we got to the following day, I said, there's 2 different settings here, and this is going to be the winning or losing of this rally. I've either got it right or Mark has got it right. So it's going to be between the 2 of us. So different drivers have different techniques, but I was always used to setting up the suspension on the Pro Drive cars to come to Ireland. And so we got that car set up. And to this day, that for every year after, that became the Belgium setting, the Holland set, all of those rallies across Europe, they used our settings that we set the car up with in Donegal. So we got the car down, and the engineer and I made him promise me that no one would get these settings. So after day 1, I think it was stage 5 and 6, we had a slow start. Both Mark and I had a slow start. But when we got to 5 and 6, we, I think, moved forward a little bit, and we won those 2 stages because my car was more comfortable than his. And I think it was midday Saturday that someone said to Mark, you really need to consider going on to Andrew's settings here. That's what happened. Yeah. And then it was snip and tuck. He'd take 3, I'd take 3, he'd take 5, we'd take 5. And it was just an amazing race. And he upped our game. I will say that in full credit to him. He upped our game, and then the pace got to a level that where it got to.
Yeah. And James, from your point of view, you had been in world cars, you had been in the S5, the S6s, all up through the Pro Drive range, but they were customer cars. This Mitsubishi, there was no such thing as a customer package. This was the real deal, Did it feel different right from the get-go?
Yeah, well, I suppose the first time I sat in the car, I think, before scrutiny to make sure the seatbelts fitted. And after that, the next time I sat in the car was in front of him, green on, heading out to the first stage. So we went off down the road. Next thing, there was some kind of a hydraulic business in the back of the car. My mechanical knowledge, obviously, is vast in these matters. But next thing, there was this. I said in my, oh dear, Andrew, I think the car's in bother. Basically, you know what I said. But the thing is after calving. So he said, no, that's what it does. So this thing was hissing and whatever inside, and I said, grand, okay. So in fairness to it, we went down into the first stage, and I'd never sat in a works car previously, but the nearest I can explain it had the length of the old Opel Manta, and had the power of a jet. And this thing, you just felt you got a kick in the backside, in the back of the seat, and it flung you halfway down the road. It was phenomenal, The power was unreal in it. And obviously Andrew was he had the bucking bronco kind of half tamed at that stage, but it really was phenomenal. And I suppose the other thing was the lads had actually done all the testing on dry roads, I think. And when it came to Friday, of course, the man above decided to bless us. So really we were at nothing. I think the tires mightn't have been great. And with that level of power, and if it taught me anything, is the fact that those cars are so specialized that you can actually dial them into even the smallest couple of 100 meters of road, whether that's dry or wet. So your settings can be absolutely brilliant for a small patch of road, but flog and kill you everywhere else. Do you know that kind of a way? That they're so technically advanced that it is possible to dial them into such an extent. But the big thing with those was that Mitsubishi, they didn't have customers. We were their first ever customers, if you call it that. So if you bought a car or got a car from M Sport or Pro Drive or whoever at the time, whatever you got, you really wouldn't be probably not capable of running it, and the car would for many reasons. One of which, a lot of the stuff they wouldn't give you anyway, but, and more of it. Reality is, if it was lifed, you'd probably get one event out of it. The whole thing would have to be rebuilt, so nobody could really afford them. So on that score, the car had been up. That's if you like, the level at which the Mitsubishi was running on the world scene.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to Donegal, it was running against the, if you like, slightly detuned Mitsubishis and our
Subarus and Fords.
Yeah. That's not to take away from the achievement of the two nutcases that were behind the wheel, but it was still it really was phenomenal. And as I say, even yet, you just some of the photographs, the car basically it took I think it took a lot of air that weekend. Let's be honest about it.
And you remember, James, when I was doing the test, it was up at Cynthia Fury's cousin's house, Russell's, and we were testing a very bumpy section of road, and there was a very bad left-hander, bad right-hander, and every time the car would try and push, like a front-wheel drive car, would trying to push me through the hedge on the opposite side and in the opposite way. And I got back in, I said to John Easton, I said, John, what's going on here? This car wants to push me off the road. He says, okay, Andrew, it feels like you're probably driving at a second a mile too slow. And I'm going, right? You're telling me go harder? He says, yeah, I'm telling you to go harder. Go harder. And as soon as I went harder, the car turned in like a dream. He was 100% right. I was driving it as if it was the other cars I was driving. It was another second a mile in this thing. And I'm going, whoo! Bring it on. And then when James got to feel that on the Friday, the first couple of stages, you were going, my goodness, what is going on here? Because I remember you saying to me after the second or third stage, what is this car doing to us around these corners? And I'm going, I was told to drive it hard, James.
Just put the head down and call the next note and get on with it. Yeah.
And Graham, from your point of view, we've done a wee bit of homework coming up, before we started recording. This was the car that was in Monte Carlo. We keep going back to this term, the real deal.
Absolutely. I mean, just to put into context, the previous rally for the team, which was all the same guys, the same mechanics, the same engineers, same team manager, they had come back 2 weeks previously from doing the Acropolis rally in Greece with UC Valimaki. They were coming straight off the World Championship to Donegal, and the two cars that showed up, they were ex GG Galley, ex Harry Rovanpera cars that had come off the World Championship that year, but actually also then Higgins's car went on to do the World Championship the following year. So those cars were not end of life works cars going off to find their next home with a new owner. They were full rally art cars that were at the absolute highest specification. Went back for full rebuilds after that rally, because that is just the way they did things. And the level of engineering that those guys went to, and I think we've probably actually got an insight into it the last 6 months, having bought one of these cars, and that's another story possibly in the end of the podcast. That we now have one of these very, very special beasts, because there was only 16 of them ever built. But the engineering discipline that John Easton, and he took rally art, the rally art team over. It's now MML Sports, which is his business. But the level of engineering that those guys had was on a Formula One level. And if you look at individual components on that car, if they want to get one rebuilt now, they actually go to the same supply chain as the Formula One teams in the UK, because all of the bits were specially manufactured, and right through the suspension componentry, the electronics, everything that those guys did was to the highest possible standard. And I think as much as we were used to in Ireland, particularly in that sort of decade in the 2000s of stuff coming out of the World Championship and very special cars, I think that weekend those guys and those two cars brought the engineering level to another level from what we were used to. And that's I think something very special to look back on, that it was one of the very few times, if not the only time, to have two fully works cars with a works team on Irish tarmac.
Yeah, ProDrive would have sent over an engineer, and that engineer could have been working with maybe 3, 4, 5 cars. Mitsubishi sent over engineers for 2 cars. Like you said, there was a guy there for the engine, there was a guy there for the suspension. Every component almost, or the major component in the car had an engineer.
Well, the engineer that built the Donegal car for me, along with John Easton at the time, Malcolm, is after rebuilding the car we've purchased that was in Donegal for the run this year. So Malcolm is, forever building Mitsubishi World Rally cars, and he's a very special guy at it. So
yeah, these guys had worked. They'd won all the 4 World Championships with Tommy Mackinnon back in the Group A. Obviously, I think it's well documented. The World Rally car era probably didn't go as well for Mitsubishi. The factory funding was getting pulled at that time. They actually had a deal done with Abu Dhabi for 2007 to rejuvenate the team, and almost in the same way now that M Sport have the deal with Ford to be essentially full factory, but with, it's an independent team. Mitsubishi centrally had cut that funding, and these guys were trying to keep that going. But the core of that team went right back to the Tommy Mackinnon days. And as you said, Kevin, quite rightly, there was a specific engineer solely focused on the engine, specific engineer solely focused on the suspension. And actually in the test, there were several runs where the engine guy would get in. He actually had a set of headphones that he plugged specifically in to listen just to the engine noise. And he would be sitting with his eyes closed, going up and down this tarmac road in the back of Churchill somewhere, and how he kept his eyes closed. I sat in that hot seat a few times, not as many times as James, but he kept his eyes closed and just listened to the engine note. And from that, he knew what the engine was doing. These guys were just on a phenomenal level, really, and it was a pleasure to be part of it.
And Andrew, I suppose the fact there was 2 identical cars and somebody of the level of Mark Higgins driving the second car, that it added an extra layer or level of credibility to your win. It's not a case that you came along with the strongest machine and the rest of the local competitors were in lesser cars, so certainly it added extra level of credibility, I would see, to the win that you took on the event.
Yes, but look, I've had a lot of respect for a lot of drivers over the years that came to Donegal, particularly Mark Higgins. Mark and I raced against each other in the Ulster, and he won. I raced him several times. He and I were always in the throw of battle with each other, but I have to say he was the better driver on those occasions. And for me to get the 2 World Rally cars identical, well, that was going to be a level playing field. So the best man was going to win that. And, to be fair, if Mark had got ahead of us, he'd have been very hard to beat. And so when he was taking 2 or 3 seconds off me in the second day on some of the stages, I had to take them back. Otherwise, he would have got in front. And that was the inner feeling that I had, and James at the time, because Rory Kennedy had the best navigator with him that knew the stages from Donegal sitting with him. I had the best navigator from Cork sitting with me. And just like that, James and Rory have competed many times. So it was a battle between driver, navigator, and we have total respect for each other, always had. And it was really down to a great race. And don't forget, we had Colin McRae that weekend in Donegal in the 6R4 Metro. And I remember hearing footage of him coming off one of the stages going into Knockalla saying, what's Nesbitt's time? And O'Brien. He still wanted to know what our times were, even though he was driving the 6R4 Metro. And you remember he went down the road backways, and the car control the man had was just unbelievable. And over the years, I was very fortunate enough to have raced with Colin, as I did with Richard Burns, not to mention a number of other people out there. But that was the weekend. They were all there to see these Mitsubishi World Rally cars arrive. And what a spectacle they all got.
And
the other thing there, Kevin, was the fact that when I on the run up to tonight, it was a bit like doing my leaving cert all over again. I had to go back and set a whole lot of swatting and whatever. But got most of the stuff, unfortunately, is gone. We were of an era of websites. Remember those things? And rally forums. Remember those things?
Stolen scandal started.
Harrison Pace notes, Lord bless Brian. Remember those things? When now it's all instant and all the rest of it. But in fairness, the one man who's still there was Angus, and I went in and I was able to count 23 World Rally cars started that event actually on the start line.
Wow.
So that is some. Okay, the other side of it is there were 23 Group N cars as well. So let's not forget those lads. But remember, okay, we were in a slightly different era, because we had a number of people there that have since left the sport or whatever, and you had lads that really were pushing really hard, particularly at the beginning. You had like young Gareth Jones,
Kevin Lynch, another man.
Yeah, Kevin. So Kevin led it for a while.
Yeah.
So you had a whole raft. I don't know. We were number 6 or 7. I think was Mark number 18 or 19 or something. Because our entries went in early as usual. You know, they usually carry on. Yeah. So there were a couple of holes appeared and we filled them. But yeah, I think it was, at the time, it was close enough to a who's who of Irish rallying. In fact, I'd say the number of lads that were left at home that weekend were, you know, from the top 20 were few and far between. So anybody who was anybody turned up that weekend, and the likes, yeah, you know, we had McHale's of various generations there, and you know they put it up to us as well. So yeah, while it ended up being about the Mitsubishis, it was, and I think Kevin Lynch and Gareth Jones were probably numbers. I don't know, were they even in the top 10 on the seeding?
I think
the first day they were tips.
No, but from a seeding point of view, I think they were well down the field. So anybody in the top 20 was capable of winning the thing.
For sure.
And you know, everybody was taking pot shots at everybody.
And like I remember that the thing that sticks out in my mind from that year was the first Mark II Escort on the road was number 41. Like that shows, you know, the level of World Car and Group N machinery. And at that stage, the Group N machinery was, you know, second to none here and there. And, you know, you had the likes of Gary Jennings and all these guys in the Group N category.
Well, the reality of it was, Kevin, and I think it's interesting to look back on it now, you know, so many years on, but 2006, the whole country had gone stone mad.
Yeah.
You know, and I think actually that entry list is probably as good an insight into how mad the country was. The number of World Rally cars, and like you talk about the guys pulling out all the stops to be on the start line in Donegal. Yeah. These boys weren't turning up in horses and carts. Like this was, what is the absolute best that I can get?
Yeah.
And you know, I think it just brought the level of competition to. I think certainly for me, you know, if not the peak, one of the peaks. Obviously, we had the pleasure of Mr. Loeb and Mr. Gronholm and those guys coming over, you know, in following years. But I think in terms of a pure Donegal, it really was exceptional.
Oh, like that! Well, I do believe it will go down in the history books, if not the best, definitely in the top 3. You know, there's no doubt about it. And like Andrew, like we'll go back to the whole, you know, Mark Higgins thing. Like Mark, as you say, you said always the tight races, but Mark always seemed to just be that wee fraction ahead. Was there a bit, I want him to come to my turf and we'll see who's the boy then, you know?
Well, I went to his turf in the Isle of Man and he beat us. And he came then to Ulster, and he and I were at each other, and he hit a pole. I remember going in the Ford Works car. As Shane says, it was a Ford Works car. And so he went on to win the rally. But the point I'm going to get to here, I was the oldest driver in 2006 to win the Donegal International Rally. I was probably 2 stone heavier than I would normally be. And Mark was probably his usual 10 or 11 stone. So power to weight ratio played a big part in that car.
Yeah,
so I had to drive the nuts of it to just stay in front of him, you know, because and James and I would have been similar in the weight bracket, and Rory and Mark were similar. So I would say we were carrying an extra rim and tire at least in the car. So, and that's a second a mile we had to overcome.
And Conor, I think we'll cut across here now to the first clip from Brina. This here, words fail me. Just wait till you see this.
Mind your braking. Half the right 26, left 20.
Oh,
Like,
I remember that corner so well.
Oh, James, I don't know. I do think you need some kind of talking to or something. Like how you can sit there and you weren't very calm, mind you, but it's something else.
Yeah, remember basically was would have been something. Well, obviously a corner we'd have discussed because remember we'd either discuss, fight, I don't know, whatever. Have like a frank exchange of views, I suppose would be the way you'd put it. He'd say it was one thing, I disagree or whatever, but it didn't really matter in the end because if you like, we had the thing discussed so much that you could have called it anything. Sometimes we did, but yeah. And the other issue, I think, going down into that chicane, I think was the mud. There was always a fear. The big problem with chicanes, particularly on narrow roads, is that the car basically leaves the normal track where you have decent grip and you're going onto either the crap in the middle of the road and one wheel on the inside. So sometimes it can get to be a skating rink. Yeah. So yeah, that's, I suppose those are just looking at the clip. I don't remember a thing of it, but just looking at the two clips, those are the two things that kind of spring to mind.
Yeah, but do you remember James coming into that crest? Because when I watched it, I was back here watching it. You'll see the car go sideways, and we're full on fifth gear. We knew that the chicane was coming, and it was loose as you were landing, so you could see the opposite lock coming on. And I have to say, as I was sitting here, the hairs were rising on my legs and the back of my neck and everywhere else. Not my head because I've lost it there, but that's just what makes it special.
And with regard to the pace notes, James, you mentioned there, there's a bit of a robust conversation around them, but who's responsible for putting the remembers in? Is that you, James, or is that Andrew, or, who? No,
it'd be Andrew. And the heel of the hump, the notes are always the driver's notes. That's a kind of the very basic rule in rallying. They can only be the driver's notes. If he doesn't agree with them, or whatever, the last run over the stages, we would always, if there are any amendments to be made, I'll make them, and we'll give the last run are as they will come out during the event. No, that doesn't. Me putting in. Sometimes maybe I'd ad lib. It would happen if it was a thing. The road got very, very wet. And I get particularly from a braking point of view. I remember happy on the Jim Clark, I think one time, Andrew, going down into what's his name's farm. Actually, the man who ran Mitsubishi for many years, Lord be good to him.
Andrew Cowan.
Andrew Cowan. We one of the stages actually went down the main road and we turned left up, I think, in his front gate and up into the farmyard and back out the other entrance to the farm. I remember saying to Andrews, try the brakes, going down the main road on the Jim Clark. So the thing took off like it was on 4 concrete blocks. It was, sometimes you will, but 99% of the time you don't change. You certainly don't change notes. But remember, maybe it was only in the notes once. I'm not too sure how many times I called it.
But as I said before, many times I'm partially deaf, and with James's volume control and all of that, it all helps, and hand movements. And if you ever see, and you will have seen it through some of the video footage, you see me putting my thumb up. There's no comment. He understands that I heard him and I'm clear. And we're going to go in a wee bit deeper into that corner now. So that's it.
You hear him, but you're not listening.
No, the thumb up means
I got this.
I've got it. As long as he knows I've got it, then he leaves it to me, and that's the way. It was a great way to operate.
And Andrew, when you're making the notes and you're doing the recce, how often would you get out of the car and walk a verge and test the grass to see could you cut?
Never. Walk. How would you have time for that? No, you're joking. No, we had a very simple system, and Bertie Fisher, bless him, advised me on many occasions, Andrew, you make your notes, you run your notes, you check your notes. And if you have a chance at any time to have a fourth run, have it. But outside that, you get off the stage and do your business then, because you have to be good enough to drive that car with that level of information. As James says, when he made the notes, we checked what he had written down. and then we run them, and that's when we changed nothing. So whatever was on that page, that's what was applied. Now, there's a few words that James would have thrown in, as we know, depending on how deep we were going into some of the corners, that was extra vocabulary, we'll call it. But outside that, the notes were the notes.
And you know, I just in my head, you know, the Candrum, the famous jumping Candrum, you always point, you know, took the arrow out of the. Did you ever, in the reggae, did you just drive that and see that you could cut through the grass there, or was that just on the day, just go for it?
I would have driven that up to that at probably 10 mile an hour. We'd have seen the line through it, and we would have seen where we thought the car would land, and usually did land where we thought it would land, and we'd be on the right-hand side of the road, and we cut probably half, James, or quarter, or somewhere in between, whatever the note was called on that one. And we always knew she was going to come up sideways and land, and on we'd go. And what a spectacle for the spectators. But what I will say, every year that sign used to get closer and closer to the fence because it's not right.
I remember he was dependent on whoever was putting up the arrow, because when you landed, you had a T-junction going left not long after it. So the further in they pushed the arrow, the further in he kept chasing it. So invariably, sorry, you can get it. Yeah, there was a photograph of the car with the arrow in the middle of the radiator.
Yeah, on a couple of occasions.
Yes. And I believe a Range Rover can jump over that as well. I've heard stories.
Yeah, I brought Linda, my wife, for a spin around that stage and Knockalla one day, and she had never been on the stage because they were always out doing weather notes. And I was showing this is the line through it, and someone spotted us taking the line over that jump in the Range Rover. It was very funny.
So, Connor, I think we'll cut to the second clip there now. This is the end of Brina. And like, for once, James was actually pushing you on. Get to hear this one.
Open line 16. Right side left, 18 times overcut, keep on it. It's a middle left 7 on first 20. Keep on it. Well done. Well done. Okay. Get over.
Like, it's not very often, James, you're telling him to go on.
Well, there's quite a few times he will say it. It's just whether you've picked it up in the past in the videos. And I think through the rally, and I picked it up several times in Donegal in 2006, where he says, go on. And that means you go on. So I take his instruction on that as well.
James is not too sure.
In fairness, I suppose there might be times, yeah, when you're feeling comfortable, and I know it sounds strange to be comfortable at that speed, but yeah, one can feel comfortable at that speed, and it's just a case of every second counts, and every press of the accelerator or every little ounce of exertion on the accelerator will help. And you just want to make sure you squeeze the last bit out of your equipment. One interesting one on that was and I can't remember. I think it was one of the years in Killarney. The Pro Drive lads basically had a look. They had a look at the telemetry, I think, on the car, and they were getting very excited. And I think a rally or two later, they arrived back with this graph. No, it meant nothing to me.
I had
just all these squiggles. But they basically had watched, or they'd looked at the telemetry of I think it was the gap, Miles Gap, and they found, I think Andrew was on full throttle for something like 85%, I think, or maybe 80% of the time. He was on full brakes 15% of the time, and the other 5 was getting from one to the other. So nowhere did he actually feather the throttle, something they'd never ever seen. And they printed it out as engineers would. Look at this thing, and they were marveling at these squiggles, which basically meant nothing to me. But when they explained it to me, I said, yeah, that's our boy Andrew. Basically, he's fully committed on both ends. It's either keep her lit the whole way, or basically standing her. But there was no halfway house. So yeah, that's to an extent the Nesbitt way, and it's the bit that I got the kick out.
Yeah, it must have been something else. But like even them 2 wee clips, just the difference on the road surface, like bone dry and then running water. Like you had obviously a gravel crew. Graham, yourself, and Ollie O'Donovan, I think, were doing gravel crew. That must have made your job very difficult for the weekend as well.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Ollie and I had done a fair bit of time together, the previous few years leading up to that. So I think we both had a good understanding of the notes, which, and I think probably of all the sets of notes that are out there, they're probably the ones that not everybody understood, or certainly not they weren't the most the ones that I think Killian Duffy wouldn't have been necessarily photocopying them and sending them out on Friday morning. Anyone that was stuck for a set of notes. But actually, they made a lot of sense to Ollie and I. We spent enough time sort of running stages that we knew what was what. But for sure, it was the pressure was on as always in that role, and it is a role that's a bit behind the scenes. But it is it's an interesting one. We were running the stages with Mark's parents, Tony and Christina Higgins. So we'd bump into them in Mark's recce car at the end of most stages or at a petrol station and sort of say, well, what did you make of that? And, there was always that great kind of relationship with them. They're lovely, lovely people. And for sure, 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. going on to Cork Mountain and then straight into Breena, it was 2 very, very good stages. I think Breena in particular, it's only been run 2 or 3 times since, but I think it's a hell of a stage. And I'd love to see it come back to the Donegal International because it really is a challenge. Short enough stage, only 4 or 5 minutes long, but really, really exciting as you can see from these clips. But yeah, changeable conditions always a challenge.
And like at that, what age were you at that stage? You must have been only 17, 18?
I was 17. So it was a privilege for me. I had spent a bit of an education, with the pace notes, and I've been probably doing that job probably from 02 onwards. Previously with John Weatherly, former sort of top end British rally driver who was worked with the 22 motorsport team, and then with Ollie O'Donovan, and then Neville Matthews actually did one as well, I believe. Back, I think that was Cork. That ended in different circumstances. Again for another day, but yeah, it was through that kind of period I had the opportunity to kind of learn a lot of those stages, and watching this in car back really brought that home. It was great times.
Because like you probably remember sections and notes, and like if there was water running down it, you probably making amendments to the notes, and next thing they were being read out to your father. Then that's unreal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we were really looking out for, whereas gravel being pulled out onto the road, it's not like in the World Championship where you get to run between the passes of a stage. So we were really just looking at what might have happened with spectators running the stages that morning, or I think particularly if a farmer had been out, in a tractor or something like that and pulled a bit of mud onto the road running between 2 fields. That was something obviously that the lads would need to know about. Or I think more, in the dry conditions, a bit of gravel on the stage or a bit of mud is probably the height of it. I think it's when it gets wet or in particular changeable. I think shiny tar, you'll hear that through the pace notes as you listen back to these stages. James making a lot of calls that it's shiny. Any of those inputs about shiny tar would have been from the mud notes, because when you're making the pace notes on the recce, 4 or 5 days before the rally runs, the conditions will have changed, and if it's a dry road, you don't want to know about shiny corners. So any inputs like that would have been the feedback from us, and thankfully, bar the last square right in Atlantic Drive, I'm fairly unscathed.
And like James, do you remember, was it a dry recce? Like that, like obviously put a different slant on the whole notes as well.
Haven't a clue.
Okay.
Yeah, the reality, I presume, I know I went to look, but I couldn't find them. I think the notes are. See, it wasn't our first rodeo, so we'd have been. The stages wouldn't have been unfamiliar to us at that stage. What we'd have been. What's the 10 years, I suppose, Andrew? Wait a minute, 98 we started together, so there was. there was 7, 8 years, could even be 7 or 8, 6, 7 years of notes there. So at that stage, it isn't that you wouldn't need notes, but we'd seen it wet and dry down the years, so you had a fair idea where the water might be running and all that kind of stuff. But still, yeah, there's always stuff that just comes out of nowhere. So as to whether it was wet or dry, if it was wet, you do your best to put as much of the information in as you could at the time. I would in my notes have a little byline for myself underneath where I'd have SIW slippy if wet. If it happened, the stage was wet, and you'd always hope the stage would be wet when you'd be making notes, but you'd love to see it at its worst rather than at its best, because at least you know you have a fair idea what it's going to throw at you. But
don't forget,
can't really remember for the recce. All I do remember is I think we actually had a Mitsubishi works recce car.
Yes.
That I do remember.
We have a photograph of it, James.
A Mitsubishi Bitsa. That was about. I think that was about everything in it.
Yes.
And Andrew, from your point of view, like that's it. Not only we'll chat about that later on. The trust you have in James, the trust you had in Graham and Ollie to give you the notes that you could drive to. That's very cool for a guy that was 16, 17. It's an amazing responsibility on Graham's shoulders.
Yeah, well, he had plenty of experience from a young fella. He'd been sitting in a lot of cars and he understood what was needed, as did Ollie. And don't forget, we had 25 people in our team for most international rallies, and that was a lot of weather note people, the management team, Ian Hard at the time, and a lot, with people on suspension, people on brakes, people on tires, and the weather crews. We'd have had 4 weather crews out, and some of the stages would have had 2 teams at quarter point and at 75% in to give us the information, as well as the guys putting their notes, because they'd drive through, and part of the stage could be dry, and all of a sudden you get to the top of Knockalla and the rain's coming down at you. So the people would then inform us back to the notes what they seen the conditions to be. And all I want to know, was it dry or was it wet? And at 75%, if it was dry, if it was wet at 25%, I'd still go on slicks probably. Because from midpoint it was going to be dry, and that's where you take the time off. As you know, in the past, James, we've done Knockalla a few times in slicks when it was raining.
Yeah, it works.
And that's all you'll say in the matter.
Yeah, it works with a standing knife.
Yeah.
Cut.
Just on that last clip we watched there, I think in terms of where that was and the significance of that stage in the rally, so the 2 Mitsubishis were fastest on both runs of Brina, but that being the second run that we're watching there, which was stage 9, that was the point the boys went into the lead. And actually, and I think he'd done a tremendous rally up to that point. I think Kevin Lynch had a bit of bother and dropped back a little bit, but that was the point from which the first Mitsubishi went into the lead, and Mark was clearly coming behind. I think he was maybe lying. I think that maybe got him up into the top 3, and then he pushed up into the top 2. But I think really from that point onwards, that was the last stage on Saturday morning, going into service, before then tackling the big stages Saturday afternoon, which are obviously so famous, particularly Knockalla. But really from that point, the 2 Mitsubishis were at the head of the field, and it kind of goes on from there.
Yeah, I think Mark Higgins' first time in Knockalla, that for him must have been daunting. Did you see that as somewhere you could gain the advantage, Andrew?
Yeah, but not against Mark Higgins. Mark Higgins spent his life in World Rally cars. I hadn't been in a World Rally car for 2 years before that, so he probably had the upper edge on me in terms of seat time. So I had to overcome that. The fact that we probably had been over Knockalla a large number of times helped, but the road was wide for the best part, so it was it was going to be down to both drivers to take it on, which he did. And don't forget, he was winning some of the stages as we were losing to him. So it was snip and tuck for probably 6 stages on the Saturday evening, where he took half and I took half. So that's a 50-50 position.
Mhm.
The only thing is, I think we probably stole a bit of a lead with the likes of High Glen, Low Glen,
And
because we were
Sunday, yeah.
we were always fast in that particular stage. Knockalla, I loved it. James and I just loved Knockalla, and you went into Kerrygord and Corran Hill. I loved all those stages.
Mhm.
Like, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. Connor, I think we'll pull up that first clip there from Knockalla.
On crest it in, keep tidy. Double. Square left to the four on crest. He's square left to the four on crest. Right to the four, tighten the sign. Tighten the sign. In top. Right side middle left, one over crest. He's right side middle left, one over crest. Brake out and loose hairpin junction left 26 around the bale. Mind your braking. Loose hairpin junction left 26 around the bale. In top.
Wow.
I was braking there 100 yards before the.
If you go back to the left-hander and the right-hander, I could see Donegal standing on the hedge with his helicopter in the background. And he and I often talk about that stage. And he was saying to me, Andrew, you slid round both corners. Do you realise that? I didn't realise it until I watched that in-car footage. And if you look at it closely, we were sliding in both directions around that corner, and the car was full on in fifth gear.
And like, James, at that point, next stop America. do you even think about that whenever you're there and then in the zone at that time?
No, you're driving the road.
Right.
Yeah. What's at the other side of the hedge?
Doesn't matter.
Let it there for the moment, and most of it will pass us by. Yeah, the one thing the one issue there, if you look at it when you're braking, again, sometimes if the car gets onto the white line, you're losing grip on two wheels. So it's just that's why you just have to. You nearly need a line for braking down into that hairpin. And it's amazing. You get bitten once by those white lines, you don't do it again. And particularly on a wide road like Knockalla, you just when the car is hanging on by its toenails, you touch the white line and you'll feel it. You really will, because the car will move. So
you can feel that coming up through the seat of your pants, basically.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You will, yeah. No, I think that's that crest on the big long. It's like a helter skelter down to the hairpin. That's probably my favorite bit of Knockalla. Because the car, if you come out of it hard enough, which obviously we did, the car goes light, but she has so much time to actually come back down to earth and sit back down on her haunches for the braking. It's a class piece of road.
Yeah, and on the rev limiter as well over the crest.
Yeah.
And that's just at the start of that stage, and obviously that clips from kind of the midpoint, or certainly coming up over the top of the mountain and down into that chicane before taking off. I think we'll see another bit of the really fast stuff, but the first couple of corners of that stage, and I think again we'll remember Donegal 05 the previous year in the blue S9 going off in Will Hare's Bend. Mm-hmm. So actually, if you listen to the in-car that'll be up on YouTube, James's call coming up to Will Hare's Bend, cold tires, remember. Mm-hmm. Going into that stage and going up that mountain, the previous year, that's where it came a cropper. And, obviously a rally's never won by Knockalla on a Saturday afternoon, but certainly it was looking good the previous year. So I think in the context of that and how well the rally was starting to go, I think more than any other year, it was about getting over Knockalla and living the fight for the rest of the day, because that is obviously a huge turning point in every Donegal rally, is whether it's Saturday morning or Saturday lunchtime, Knockalla is the big one. Yeah. So I think it's watching those calls and that first couple of miles. I think, as you can see, a couple of miles on, the commitment was never in doubt, but it was certainly I think in front of James's mind, and I'm sure Andrew's as well. And
because even halfway around that corner, fifth gear's pulled. And James has warned him about cold tires. He drops to fourth, but halfway around the corner, fifth gear's pulled and it's nailed again.
Yeah, but I think the one thing about the previous year was that not alone had we cold tires, then we also ran Moose, probably for the first and only time in the country that we ran it. And the Moose, because of the delay, the Moose itself had actually gone cold. So you had tires that not only were they cold, but I think when the moose goes cold, it contracts. So we actually had to close enough to four soft, cold tires going around that corner, and effectively 4 concrete blocks. So we were probably never going to get around it.
And Pirelli wanted us to test the moose that year, and it was never on any of my tires before or since. So there you go. Good point on that one.
And Connor will pull up the second clip here. I advise you to pull in your belts a bit tighter for this one.
Yeah. That's the same Donegal, yes, sir.
That Doherty's house.
Yeah, that is a great part of the stage. I just love it.
There's no lift for nothing there, sir. It's frightening, isn't it? That
well, and the only other thing about the Mitsubishi, it was doing about 4 or 5 mile an hour faster than any of the other cars we ever went over that on.
Right.
So we knew it. The telemetry told us it was doing 133 through those 2 corners.
I was actually standing down on the left-hand side where those people are at that gate, and that is, a big place in Irish rally. That speed coming up to it, up that hill, and coming up that crest. There's the little junction on the right-hand side before it, and that's where you take the right side, left 18, and then you're calling it square left 18, right 18 over crest. I mean, in those notes, that means like as close to flat as you like. And driving up that in a road car or standing at the top of it, it is not flat. And really, I think that's one of the places to see a world rally car in Irish rallying that is probably like nowhere else. And I can only imagine what it was like from the inside, but certainly from standing down on the left-hand side, it was pretty mad.
Yeah, but James and I had enough practice on it.
Enough practice have been bad, or enough
over
practice
the
at the corners. And that's one thing I noticed about the Mitsubishi. Only a 5-speed box as well, too. Did that take a wee bit of dialing into your head as well? Was you always tempted to pull another gear?
Yeah, I was always trying to pull another gear. And also the engine was a 5-cylinder, not a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder. It was a 5-cylinder. And that's why there was the very unusual noise out of the car. Well, I didn't hear it that much, but from outside, it was always sounding as if it was off a cylinder. It was missing a cylinder, or it had one too many. But that was the makeup of the World Rally engine.
Mm-hmm. And like James, for you calling them notes and this come through the seat of the pants, that must be some sensation that them corners are pinned like that there.
Yeah, but if you look, I suppose over the years, kind of my volume tended to go up into getting dodgy, or someplace I'd be a small bit anxious about, and you kind of drop back down, and you almost enjoy the rest of it. So you could see, I know exactly what that is. It was really relaxed coming up. There's probably the guts of 2 miles of flat out. It ain't straight, but it's flat to the washers. And when you get up to the top, yeah, just kind of take a deep breath and kind of squeeze everything in the hope that you get through the two little 90s and we're away again. But yeah, it's a funny thing. There's a kind of comfort to know that everything is working. Your man's is well up for the job, and the car is well up for it. So yeah, you're in probably the most privileged place. Isn't that you're considering privilege, but you just feel a comfort and a security that everything is it's working well. There's no big danger here. It'll be all right. And it's a funny old game. A lot of it is in the head, and I think while on the Saturday, probably Friday, it sounds strange, but I know that these two big cars are coming, and everybody, there could be a bit, and then people said, oh, who the hell do they think they are bringing these yokes? We'll show them. And by Friday evening, Saturday morning, it was a case of there's a train coming through, guys. Either you either stay ahead of it or get off the road, because these two boys are going to come through, and they're gunning for the lot of you. So it's a case of, I think, psychologically I won't say you had them beaten, but a lot of it is in the head. There's a lot of mind games, or a lot of, if people think, if you can get the upper hand on them, like any sport, there's you then have to persuade yourself that you can have a cut off of them, and you have to do it. And in fairness to, I think there's Gareth McHale. Gareth was well up for it that weekend. In fairness to the lad, he put up some phenomenal times, as did the men we spoke of earlier. So while we were going hard, there were other boys there that weren't a million miles away. So you have to take your hat off to them. And it probably made it all the better for the spectators, because it wasn't a two-man show. It was, there were other lads sticking their oar in, and all the better for that. But I suppose in my head, whatever about his head, I was pretty it isn't that I was confident, but I suppose one had experience, and one had, at that stage, I suppose, a little bit of craft put together that, we're in here with a fair good shout. No point in panicking at that stage anyway, is there?
And James, at those speeds, you have an awful lot of trust in Andrew, and I suppose likewise, Andrew, you have an awful lot of trust in James calling the notes at the right time, etc. Like that, I suppose, is it a case of you just get into the car and the other is going to deliver for both of you, or what's the thought process when you get into the car and to start a day's rallying?
Yeah, you don't overthink it.
No, I think you all touched on it earlier. You feel it in the seat of your pants, and whether the car's comfortable, if the suspension's working well, the engine, the braking. If it's all working well, both James and I had enough experience to know that it was comfortable. And you always drove the first day in Donegal in particular at a pace, I would say, around the 85% mark of where your ability was, because you knew there was another big day coming on Saturday and Sunday. So we would have always split Friday in as one day, but Saturday was 2 days rallying for us, and then you had to finish it off on the Sunday. And that's the way we worked it. But the comfort zone is to drive to a limit, and I've always said I always try to drive close to 98%, but never 100%. In the latter years before that, I'd have been 110. History will tell you I was off the road. So we had to learn where the pace was, and when James joined me, we learned the pace very quickly. Don't forget, I had very good navigators before that in Brian Murphy, who spent many a year teaching me the art of rallying, and we had a lot of good wins as well together. And not forgetting Rory Kennedy sat with me once and got me into third place in '97 in the Ulster Rally, which was the only time I finished a rally that year because I had crashed in every one of them. That was after my road exit in '96, where I didn't have the power of my hand. So all of those experiences we've had, James says, if you feel comfortable, I've always said, you sit in the armchair of your rally car, you feel everything through the seat of your pants, and it's like when the car steps out, your bum's telling your brain to turn the car right or left. And that's where the comfort zone is. If you're driving above that at 100 plus, James will feel uncomfortable and I will feel uncomfortable. So that's where the line is in terms of the comfort zone.
And the other thing to remember is we had a phenomenal team of people around us and behind us. The likes of Ollie and Graham out doing the notes, and we had huge confidence in the likes of Ian Howard, and a whole host of people back at HQ, so to speak, who were putting all the information together. So like as I say, I think it was Jimmy and Sylvia were doing weather that year. I know Grace was out with Linda. I've forgotten could have been a couple of more.
Neville Matthews.
Yeah.
Stevie Dolan was always there. Neville and Stevie in the tire van, I think, with the backbone of the team, and certainly the head of the entertainment committee as well.
That's right, and we had even a former Mudnote man. I think Nestor Anthony. I think he was in with Tim McNulty that weekend. So we had Gary. I think Gary was driving that weekend. We had him in doing notes. We trained him for notes at one stage as well. So we'd have at some stage or other we'd put half the country through our hands.
And not forgetting Enda Garvey, who brought the Subaru S12B to Donegal. He put it back in the Cuisine de France colours for us to show that off in Donegal. So I'm nearly afraid to forget people's names here.
Yes, that is the problem, isn't it? But as I say, we were always lucky to have a huge. You see the nut behind the wheel and the head the ball next to him, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Right? There's so many other people putting a lot of work and a lot of hard work and time at ridiculous hours of the morning. As Graham was saying, he was out on those stages at 5 and we were still snoring, if you know what I mean. So there's a lot. It just doesn't happen, and that's the one thing. While people are, people look at the two in the car, the reality is there's an awful lot of hard work done by a lot of people behind the scenes. So,
at the same time, we had Matthew, my younger son, and your daughter Aisling. They're only 12 or 13, and they never really cared much other than run after each other. So give them a mention, James.
Yeah, and bite one's tongue and when it comes to the pair of them. But yeah, in fairness, they were out. They were out there from the. I think, in fairness, I did Grace Nash, and just like Graham and Matthew, I think they were out doing weather crew. I'd say from about the age of 4 or 5.
Yeah,
I think there's even a clip of Aisling, I think at the age of 3, basically bringing buns to the soccer island for Liam Knockalla and myself. So yeah, it's you have GA families, but I think you've just struck into rally families that have been brought up with it, whether they liked it or not.
Yeah,
so.
That was our holidays.
That was, but I think Fisher brought this level of professionalism to Irish rally. Whenever Bertie's had, we lost Bertie, you took on that mantle. You seen the professionalism Bertie brought to the sport, and you lifted it to another level again. With Cuisine de France, and then later, in bringing this Mitsubishi team. Did you feel it like almost an ambassador role that you were bringing to Irish rallying as well? Was like, did you want to drive Irish rallying to the forefront of people's minds? That's what I'm getting to.
Well, in 2000, Ivan Fisher sat down with me after Bertie's accident, and we agreed that we would get a World Rally car back to Ireland, and lo and behold, it took off after that period for us. While we had won in 96 and 98, those years after that were very special in the Cuisine de France cars. 2000 was very special, 2002 was very special. As you know, we won the 2 championships together, James and I, Subaru. But then to get the chance to drive the Mitsubishi World Rally car, we were retired. I was retired for sure from international rallying, and then this Walter Mitty guy arrived with this Mitsubishi idea. It turned out to be the luckiest thing of our lives, and I suppose in a small way we have to say thank you to whoever you are out there for bringing us the opportunity that has probably changed James' life and my life forever in motorsport. That was just the most amazing drive ever of my life.
Yeah, because you think about it, 17 years later, here we are talking about it. It's bonkers, isn't it? And Conor, you wanted to jump in there about Sunday.
Yeah, I suppose moving on basically to controlling the rally then from Sunday. So what do you call it, Glen? What was the stage like? What was the approach going into Glen?
James?
Yeah, Glen. Yeah, for a lot of people, Knockalla is the stage. For Andrew Nesbitt, it's he calls it Highlin, Lowdlin, and there's a section across the mountain before you get down into the village of Glen, and you take a number of very, very deep breaths going around some of those corners. it's serious commitment up there. If you want to see Andrew Nesbitt and serious commitment, it's up there in Hydlin, Lodlin. Some of the stuff, if you drive it, well, I haven't driven it, but if you were to drive it in a road car and you just look at these things and you're taking them flat, you said, yeah, you're off your head. But yeah, it worked. It works. But yeah, Hydlin would probably, in hindsight, be the most dangerous stage you'd have to attack Nesbitt. Yeah, it's not a stage you'll get anything off of him inside there.
But having said that, James, we nearly went off coming through the village. We were opposite locked for all of a half a second.
I thought that was only a display for the spectators.
Conor, I think we'll take a wee look at the clip as they come just before, maybe a couple of miles outside the village.
That was evil, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite nasty. Like the water running down the side of the road and all there too. Like it was.
Yeah, it was that first right hander it's pretty much at the end of the very fast stuff. Mm-hmm. That was always dodgy anyway. There was kind of black shiny tar there even on a good day, and water on top of it was. Yes, you could see he was fighting with the steer and the thing. Actually, I think it probably would have made a nice photograph for somebody if they happened to be there, kind of job, you know.
That was the first stage out Sunday morning, and if you look at that, the rally, I think Saturday afternoon, as we said, it was very nip and tuck. It was kind of 2 seconds here, 3 seconds there, and on that stage, the lads took 6 out of Higgins and 16 out of Gareth in third place in the stage. So, I think more than any other stage on the rally, I think that was where there was probably peak commitment, perhaps. And as James said, that was a real favourite stage and probably a target stage. And it is, the old cliche, the Fisher tactic, the first stage in the morning, see who's had the breakfast. And I think we could see on that one, it was a really good run.
Sure. And Andrew, you obviously had the Weetabix that morning?
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I probably hit an Irish fry. Never change a habit of a lifetime. But coming down through that, if you notice, it was 5th gear the whole time. Probably that's where the time was taken on that stage.
Yeah, there's a really nasty. There were really nasty bit. It's probably been tarmac sense, but really nasty bit west of the village. A whole lot of corners which basically tightened, and some of them tightened on top of tightening. It was fairly nasty stuff back there, because I think there's a couple of big rocks from memory that were kind of just sitting there waiting to collect you.
Yeah, we'll cut now to the other clip now. This is out the other side of the village.
Ah, yeah.
Pick up the gear. Sorry, did you hear me talking there?
A wee bit, but I think you were cursing.
They got away.
We were in 5th gear through that water, James.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but I think we maybe.
You weren't wise, were you?
No. Weren't so wise yourself.
I'm not sure who was the least wise.
What a stage, guys. That is my probably number 1 stage in Donegal. Knockalla, number 2. Believe it or not. Glen is the one I enjoyed the best. Ask Rory Candy, he'll tell you.
Graham, for you to watch that there, these guys, you see them outside the rally car, they're quite normal. But to see that there, that is bunkers in places, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it's, of course, I'm exceptionally proud of both Dad and James's achievements through those years, but getting to actually sit and recover this footage after 17 years. And, I think you see the odd clip that's up on YouTube, or you maybe watch the RPM highlights, which is a half an hour for the full rally, which doesn't really do it justice because there was so much going on. To actually be able to sit back and watch the full 7 or 8 minutes of Glen, or the full 10 minutes of Fame, or any of these stages, it really is a privilege to sit back and watch it after all these years.
For sure.
And like, Graham, are you ever shocked by the footage, or shocked by the commitment, or surprised, or when you haven't seen it maybe in a while and you come back like you have with revisiting these onboards, like, does it take your breath away?
Well, I suppose I was rared on it, Connor. Both on and off the stages, probably. We probably a fair degree of madness in our house. So I think shocked is maybe the wrong word, but seeing the pace, I think it just brings us back to the level that these guys were operating at. Not just these guys, but Mark Higgins, Gareth McKeel, Eugene Donnelly, Derek McGarity, Eamon Boland, Kevin Lynch. The list goes on and on. Austin was doing the rally that year, who's obviously a hero of mine and a hero of Irish rallying. So. When you look back and you see the times and you see the pace, it really was a special era of motorsport in this country.
Sure, for sure.
And you mentioned Famore stage, and that's where Higgins went off. James, did that relieve the pressure, or did it add to the pressure? That you had to bring the car home, or what was the mood in the camp then when the news came through?
I was never told about it. It was after the event I was told that he'd actually taken the door off it or whatever. Yeah, I think, from memory, I had very little interaction with Rory and Mark during the event for some reason. I think we might. As I say, my memory is hazy, but I don't remember have anything. Yeah, I think you just looked at the times and you knew, as I say, Nesbitt on High Glen. Basically, you kind of half knew you had that in the pocket. If we came out of that, we were, you knew you were going to be ahead of the game, or at least if they had to go at you, they had to be right on the door handles to be anywhere close to you. So you kind of, yeah, I know I'm probably coming across as a bit smug, but it's not that. I think the lads. You knew if they had to push that hard to do damage to stay with you, you knew that the pressure was on them. I won't say that we had the upper hand, but if we had a couple of seconds in the bag and they had to take it back, and they were obviously trying very, very, very hard to get that back. And test driver, they don't, as a rule, but probably one of the, close enough to one of the most experienced navigators in the game with him. You're not looking at amateurs, you're looking at two boys right at the top of their game. So if they had to push themselves that hard to stay, to stay in the game with us, or to try and have a cut off us, that of itself, I suppose, once it gives you a little, you kind of saying, yeah, okay, we're obviously doing something right here. But it's I have no recollection. Maybe in a service area, I might have seen the door stoved in or something, in which case, you were kind of, you see your man's door kind of job, But,
things happen, James. We've taken a few doors off in our time ourselves.
If you look at that section of Claymore, and
if it only stayed as doors, would be grand.
If Andrew, if you remember, John Eason came back to Donegal a month after the rally and stayed in the Shandon Hotel. Brought his wife over, because he enjoyed coming over for the rally so much, and we invited him back over. But if you remember, John, yourself, and myself went out for a spin. I think you were probably driving an M5 or something at the time, and we took off up into Faymore in the M5, and there's 7 really bad kicks consecutively. Coming out of Creasha there, heading up towards Muckish, and he couldn't believe how rough it was. And it was just actually after those kicks down to a right and a left and a right and a left, and then the next bad right-hander, that's where Mark went in. And it's an incredibly tough piece of stage. And I think that guy had worked all over the world in the World Championship, and I think that gave him a real insight into Irish tarmac. And I think Faymore, more commonly known as Port Lake, that is as rough in some of those parts and a few of those kicks. And I think actually there's on the in-car, when people get to watch it, there's one kick in particular. It's not often that you speak, Andrew, but I think you had a comment to the effect of, "Oh fuck!"
Really?
After one of the kicks, and I can tell you went through it a lot easier the second run of the stage because it was just so rough in there. But hell of a stage.
Yeah.
And Andrew,
I do it all tomorrow.
That's what I was going to say. To hear these stories and to relive them, through the NCAR, it must give you that buzz again to want to wind back the clock almost.
Yeah, well, look, it's still there. We went and bought a World Rally car, as Graham said earlier, for James and I to go play with, and it's sitting with John Easton and Malcolm at the moment, just after being completely rebuilt from front to back, gearbox, suspension. John prides himself in saying, "Andrew, I have the Donegal settings in the suspension, and springs and dampers. It's not about the gearbox or about the engine; it's about the suspension," and that stood out for him. And when the car was driven after in different countries, they used the Donegal settings where roads were similar.
That must give you an immense sense of pride that this world team that had travelled the world, come to Donegal, to your rally, and found something that you helped them to develop that changed the way they approached the events from there on in.
Yeah, well, the only thing is there was one more car built, and unfortunately we didn't get our hands on it. It's sitting in a museum somewhere in Germany, but it was the evolution of that car that we drove from Donegal. It had wider suspension, a Rhaegar suspension, I think it's called, Graham, is it?
Yeah.
And it was up-spec'd, and the engine had a different engine management system on it. And John always said, "Andrew, this car will be a half a second a kilometre faster than the one you have." And I'm going, well, who's going to beat that? And it was going to bring us right up there in front of the Citroens and everything else. Subarus, the 12Bs, it was ahead of all of those cars, but it never got seen the rally light of day.
Yeah.
And I did try to buy it, by the way, before we took this car to Donegal. But who knows? It might appear yet.
Yeah.
And it's brand new. It has never seen a rally stage once.
And James, I would say you're glad he didn't get his hands on that.
I know. In fairness, as Andrew said, it was great to works team. I think the most interesting thing is when I went, as I say, I did a small bit of research to see if I could find some paperwork. But my first introduction was I turned up at my navigator's bag. I was told, "What are you doing with that?" "We'll take that." Yeah, they didn't. The professionalism was quite amazing. A navigator's bag, it's a bit like a woman's handbag. There's everything inside, and it does flogging tire wraps. There's there's tools, there's bits of this and bits of that, and anything you might happen to need. So guess it. No, you're not having it. Yeah, there's a pouch in the door for your pace notes. There's a pouch there for the time card, and there's a third pouch for the road book. You need nothing else. There's three pins there. Forget it. You get nothing else. Anything else the car carries, and that was it. So yeah, it from that point of view, it was interesting just to see obviously, I could be carrying around 3 or 4 bottles of water and all manners of extra weight, and they just said, "No, we're not having that." So it's just the sheer professionalism of how they operate, and you can see obviously when they develop a car, they're into weight saving and all that kind of stuff. So what another half a second a kilometre would be like, all I'd be hoping is that the brakes could match it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we never had a problem really in that department, but I always remember coming in to start the Atlantic Drive before that, and sitting back and studying what they were doing. They had 3 computers in the car, and one was in the engine, one was in the suspension, and the other one was on the diff and gearbox. And all the guys are looking at all of this, and I had to pinch myself and say, is this Formula One we're at here, because that's what we were looking at. They had a complete lorry sitting there, downloading the telemetry of everything. And the first run over the last 6 stages, we had a great cut at them. What I didn't realize when we came in to do the last 3 stages, they reduced the engine power because they said, look, you have enough time up here. I didn't know it at the time. And if history will show you, while we led the rally for a long period right to the finish, the last 3 stages, those other guys took over the lead on those stages because the engine power was reduced on the car to get it to the finish. They wanted that car to win, and they didn't want to risk the engine, and they just detuned it for the last 3 runs. And if you look closely at the footage, you will see that, and you'll see me playing with the gears a little bit more rather than the power wasn't there. And lo and behold, we nearly slipped off on Atlantic Drive as a result of that.
Yeah, I think Connor will take a wee look at that incident.
Look very quickly. Okay. Square left to the board, tight and stop. Repeat. Square left to the board, tight and stop. Stop. Get up and standing one.
Yeah, that's the corner. That is the corner. But every corner on that stage and the one before it, we were down on par, only because they were protecting the engine. So we probably were losing a quarter to half a second a mile just to get to the finish line.
And James, you were being very calm there. Was it, there's no point in getting stressed here, just keep calm, we'll get out of here, with enough in hand? Or is it, you don't want to get stressed in case you cause Andrew to get anxious?
There'd be no fear of him. No, no. Yeah, look, the reality is when you're either in it, when you're in a situation, let's put it that way, it's outside of my control. There's no point to me starting huffing and puffing. It's not going to improve, get any, that's not going to change matters or improve matters. It's just a case of you have a job to do, get on with it and call the next one, so why you're not going to reverse the situation, so just get on with it.
Yes.
Let's be honest, we had it was it looked like a bang. He did the cursing for both of us. The important thing is that there was no steam, you hope it was soft enough, let's be honest about it. But while there's a lot of stones on Atlantic Drive, he could have picked the worst place. He could have picked far worse places to nudge the bank. Mm-hmm. So it really wasn't. I think the stage was evil enough anyway. I think it was wild, slippy a lot of the way. So let's be the reality is he was like a lot of the boys in the rally. He was a miracle worker to get it around so many of those corners in any event. So it isn't for me to be fellas is shouting the odds.
And Andrew, do you is there an inner panic? Is I need to get out of here, I need to get this going again, or is it better just to remain calm and settle yourself and go right? Just take it simple here.
I said earlier, you're in the armchair, and the more relaxed you are going into an event and through the event, the better the result will be. If you start panicking, you'll cause an accident. That situation really was caused by not enough power in the engine just at that point in time, compared to what we had for the whole rally. And I just, if you look at it closely, you'll see I went at it the second time. It was the second time that overdrove the corner. And if I had the power there, it wouldn't have happened. But there was enough power to get us through. We went into that stage and someone would have had to pass us to win the rally. Yeah. So it was a matter of keeping them behind us.
Mm-hmm. And the car would have got very wide if anybody had caught you, Rosie.
The stage would have been very narrow.
I think we'll cut in now to the last 20 seconds of that final stage. what can we say? I don't think there's a career there for you in the Eurovision or anywhere like that.
No. Well,
To look back at that, that must bring back so many memories to the both of you.
I'll let James go there first.
Sure, of course. As I say, to get a run in a works car is kind of the stuff dreams are made of. And I suppose even when I was starting out, you to something you would never ever dream of. Never mind, expect that anybody in the country at that stage would have had the opportunity. And I was just I had the best seat in town by a long shot. In my opinion, you wouldn't get a better team, both them professionally and the lads we brought with us, because while they brought all their world expertise, our boys brought the local knowledge, and to me that was a marriage made in heaven. And you then put Mr. Nesbitt behind the wheel. And as he said, his knowledge and experience and his ability at the setup of the car, was in many ways it was the winning of the event. So yeah, James was a lucky boy, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Unfortunately, I've forgotten far too much of it, and just want to thank you guys for helping me relive some of the stuff I've forgotten.
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, I would like just to say that I had the best navigator in town, who kept me under control and probably deserves a gold medal for all of the years he was there, maybe a gold medal for each of the years, but particularly that year, because that was the fastest rally James and I've ever competed in. And Mark Higgins kept us honest, along with all the other guys through the rally. Young Gareth McHale was driving very fast on the weekend as well. And to be honest with you, we were blessed that we got the opportunity to drive the Mitsubishi World Rally car. And, that's why we went and bought another one. And there's only 4 of them left in the world of that car. And hopefully we've got the number 1 winning car again in that particular car, because it's rebuilt from front to toe and back again. But I would like to say a big thank you to Mark Higgins and Rory Kennedy on that weekend. After the event was over, we went off to one of the restaurants. Graham, what was it? Arena?
We're down the Arena 7, yeah.
Arena 7. And I remember looking across, the 2 teams were there, all of the team, the weather notes and everyone. There were 44 people sitting around that table. And we were at one big table. And for the want of a better word, we were one big happy family. And the respect we all had for each other, and to this day, stands the same. Total respect, because without a good competitor, you'll never be a good competitor yourself. So I always say, without the opposition, you will never be anything. So thank you to all my oppositions that I've ever raced. And I mean that. Without them, I would never have been anything. Bertie Fisher was a great ambassador for the sport, but also a great mentor to me. And as was a lot of people, Austin McHale was a huge mentor. Eugene Megan, another huge mentor, who competed a lot over the years as well. So I want to say a special thank you to those people I respect in the sport, but I want to say a special thank you to Eugene Donnelly and Derek McGarty and all of those guys, Austin McHale, all of those people that I've raced. As James said at the start of the meeting here, was 22 World Rally cars there that day. Any one of those guys could have won the rally. It was who got up earliest in the morning and was ready for it. But we were especially lucky to get the Mitsubishi World Rally team into the hands of privateers and normal guys, we call us. Not that it looks abnormal from inside the car, but it was an absolute pleasure and total respect to the Donegal National Rally Club, the RIAC, and particularly all the marshals and all the medical team and everyone that helps us get to the start line and get us home safely to the finish line. a big thank you from James O'Brien and Andrew Nesbitt. Thank you.
A pleasure for myself and Connor to be involved in that conversation. So, as always, once you hit to stop recording, there's always somebody you forgot to mention, and Andrew and James were no different. Graham, there's a few people that wanted to thank.
Yeah, well, I think, we've referenced a few of the rally team there, but I think when we hit the stop button, the two lads just wanted to come back on and say that, they really appreciate all the support from the family over the year in particular. So, my own mother, Linda Nesbitt, and James's wife, Anna O'Brien, were at more or less every single rally down through those years. And then, of course, myself and my brother Matthew were dragged along, and Grace and Aisling O'Brien. I think it was in the blood for all of us. So I know that the two boys wanted to sort of make that clear at the end. They wanted to just say thanks as well. So, but what a pleasure, for myself as well to be involved in the conversation. Thank you very much, Kevin and Connor, for the platform to kind of discuss these videos, and hopefully, people out there enjoy them as much as we have.
For sure. And Connor?
Yeah, look, they're just fantastic to have the opportunity, not only to see the onboards, but to have Andrew and James talk us through them and give us the stories behind them. And whilst we looked at, the clips there during the episode, if anybody's interested, the full footage from each of the stages from the Saturday and Sunday Donegal 2006 are available on YouTube. There's a link below here, or in the description, you can get the link to it. But certainly, even if you search on Google or YouTube for Andrew Nesbitt Donegal 2006, you'll come up with the onboards.
Yeah, and you're in for some entertainment. Once you start, it's a rabbit hole. I'm warning you now. But and it's just bringing back. We've always seen maybe a 20 or 30 second clip on RPM or something, but this is full stages, unedited. It's just hair raising, mind blowing. Words fail me. Graham, a few any words that you could add in the description?
No, look, I think I've had the pleasure kind of editing the footage or getting them sort of digitized onto YouTube. So for the opportunity to watch all the stages, and I think I'll just say to rally fans, it is great to look back. It's hard to believe, it's so many years ago now, coming up on 17 years this year, and the pace that those boys were at in those World Rally cars were really as big as anything we've seen. I think probably as the technologies have moved on, the R5 cars now, the Rally 2 cars, they probably handle a wee bit better. They probably turn a wee bit better. But the sheer power of those 2-litre World Rally cars is something else. And I think you can see that, get that car up into 4th and 5th gear and just pull like anything. The torque on them was incredible. And I think it makes for an incredible watch. So in particular, if people are looking for some highlights, I think Brina on the Saturday morning is a really, really good watch. Knockalla obviously is a stage that everyone knows and loves really, really well. But actually the Sunday morning run, coming down over the mountain in Glen, we saw a few clips of it, but that full stage is fantastic. And then probably my personal favourite is Faymore, the old Port Lake stage. And yeah, I don't think anyone will be too disappointed if rally fans out there have been able to sit through this conversation, in full length and listen to the boys chat and crack. I think another few minutes to watch the videos would be well worth it. So hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's as well as that. There's, you can understand why High Glen, Low Glen, as your dad calls it, why that's his personal favourite after watching that. Like, it is, like, I was sitting in the seats trying to buckle myself in because there was a few times it got a bit leery.
Certainly does. And actually, if we didn't clip it into the conversation earlier, but if people watch the second run of Glen, about a half a mile outside the village, he's very nearly off. In fact, he is off. He's off the road, but managed to keep going. So it was pretty hair raising. And I think after that, the two boys had to back her off a wee bit and just get to the finish.
So that was the 2006 Donegal Rally special. I say, go to YouTube, go down that rabbit hole. No doubt you'll love every second of it. So that's it. So please like, share, comment, rate, subscribe. All those things makes a huge difference. And thanks very much for listening. And until next time, take care, speak soon, and goodbye.
Bye. We've been there with Toyota, we've been there with Subaru, and now we're there with Mitsubishi.
We've tried a few, all right. You think of everything.
La 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 la. Well,
Thanks very much. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, we're done with Ivan.
Down this here, December 8th.